Greetings and welcome to the Destination Goa Trance podcast, bringing in-depth interviews with artists, label people, organizers from the golden age of the 90s to the modern era. My name is Simon Peter and I'm here with the one and only Tibus.
Nice! Let's talk about Goa Trance, more specifically about one of the most legendary labels of the 90s, Flying Rhino. Peter, what was your first Flying Rhino release?
It's hard to tell, but I think it was probably Rock Beach Mafia by the Greenhouses of the Revolution. And later on, the Technosomy album and then the Airborne compilation, which is still sitting here on my shelf.
Mine was, I think, the Blueprint Corporation album. It showcases the progression of the label, since the style difference between the Technosomy LP and the Blueprint Corporation album is tangible. From the early Goa Trance style, they got to the progressive trance in 5-6 years, while still retaining high quality. They're definitely one of my favorite labels from that era. Can you summarize their history?
Flying Rhino was originally founded in 1994 by three friends in the UK. They wanted to release their own music, Slinky Wizard and Technosomy among others, and later they started to sign their friends, and the label became one of the leaders of the Goa Trance scene. They have released legendary albums, compilation series like the Flights and the Revolution series, as well as EPs, for example, all the Slinky Wizard releases. But much more detail will be shared by our guest, who is
the legendary James Monro, who has been the A&R manager of the label, but also one of the most well-known and respected psychedelic trance DJs. Not to mention his own music with Technosomy, Bumbling Loons, and countless others. We had a really nice chat with James about Flying Rhino. We discussed how it all started, how it ended, and everything in between. Enjoy.
Let's go really back to your roots as a musician. How did you start making music? Are you a trained musician? How was your journey?
I mean, I was a trained musician insofar as when I was a kid, I learned how to play the piano very basically. I sang in the school choir. But music of all sorts was very much part of my life. My father was very passionate about music. And it was actually, I think as an 8-year-old, where I first discovered or first came across the idea of enhancing the environment with sound in the background, because my father was always playing music, but when he had his friends around, obviously back in the day we didn't have playlists, it was vinyl, it was tape to tape, reel to reel tape back in the day, and we're talking in the 70s here, this might be mid 70s when I was about 8 or 9, and he showed me how to use his equipment. So I learned how to put a needle on a record, and I learned how to hook up tape. And when his friends came around for parties or for drinks or for dinner or whatever, he'd put a record on, and then the record would just go because he's busy talking with his friends, and there'd be silence. So I was sort of then I started going into his music collection and playing music to enhance the environment that I thought was relevant to what everybody should be listening to as a 9-year-old. So my influences were very nominal at that stage. But that was where I first kind of got the idea about, how important music was to enhancing the environment that people were socializing and being part of. And then from then on, receiving record tokens as Christmas presents, I started collecting music that I was passionate about, not my father was passionate about. And that was basically how it started. That was the seed of my journey into electronic music, which came when I was about 10, when my mother gave me a copy of Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen, which shot me off into the fucking stratosphere. And this was space music, this was future music, and basically from that moment on, I was utterly obsessed with electronic music, a music that wasn't preaching to you through lyrics. You created your own emotion, you created your own journey just through sound and vibration. And that was kind of where it all began. Yeah. To go into dance music, obviously we had the acid house explosion in 1988 when I just left school. I was young, I was 19, 20 years old. And again, this was something that appealed to me. I love partying, I love being with friends, and this demonstrated a new soundtrack And again, on the back of collecting electronic music that was done from Jean-Michel Jarre to Tangerine Dream to OMD, all the music of the 80s, the electronic bands, Nitsarev, Front 242, there was already a techno influence in my kind of journey. And of course, when Acid House appeared, yes, it was different because there was house music involved, but nevertheless, within that was this driving beat, and obviously mixed with taking substances at a young age, from mushrooms on the rugby pitch to whatever. This became the soundtrack, and it's kind of been my journey ever since. You know, I've been utterly hooked into electronica and what it can do to you, how it makes you feel, how it makes crowds feel. And I still don't understand what it is. All I know is that it still feels amazing, you know?
Have you played like in a band or in an orchestra as a musician, or was it really DJing in your formative years?
Primarily DJing, collecting music and playing it to others. You know, I used to DJ at the school discos. That was always my role. I just always enjoyed enhancing the environment people were in, making people have fun, making people listen to weird mixes of things they thought they knew. You know, I used to collect strange 12 inches of everything from Frankie Goes to Hollywood to Human League to whatever, and all these weird B-sides and electronic and dub versions. And that's what I used to play. So I was always looking for this sort of the more instrumental version of stuff that people already knew.
In the forming electronic scene in the 90s, how did you become a party DJ?
Again, it was through collecting music and learning how to mix with vinyl. I didn't have my own turntables. I couldn't afford them. A friend of mine did, and he was a very sociable person, and he loved the music that I used to collect and play on his decks. He used to get friends to come around and listen to me playing. And then people just started asking me to come around and play my weird music to their parties. It's as simple as that. It was not something I set out to do. I was working, doing other things. I was a decorator, a painter, a decorator, a carpenter, and a bicycle courier, along with many other things. I was just busy odd jobbing, making ends meet, and meantime spending every penny that I could on my record collection. And then, as I said, people started asking me to play my strange music at their parties. James, can you come do your thing? And that escalated. And then I went traveling. Obviously, Goa was a massive influence on what came next with Flying Rhino and everything else. But when I found myself traveling around India and going to Goa because I'd heard through the grapevine that it was a really nice place to go and relax, because India, back in the day, India was quite hard work traveling around there. It was very intense traveling. So Goa was kind of a respite. And then that was 1989, 1990. And I discovered this very small but very unique party scene that was going on there. And the soundtrack was predominantly instrumental music that was, let's say, 1 in 10 of the acid house tracks that I was hearing in England at the big raves that were going on. There was lots of house music, and then 1 in 10 of those house tracks would be this weird instrumental techno, new beat, proto, whatever it was, that when I went to Goa, I just heard those back to back. And that was when I was like, aha, this is my place, because they're playing music that I absolutely love here. There's no compromise. And that was where the kind of my passion for what came next, that's where it all kind of started. It was a very naive and innocent entry into it all. It was a complete accident.
What appealed to you in this style of music? Do you remember that? What was the melodies, the rhythms, or what was that captivated you?
The rhythmic power was one thing, but it was just the otherworldly nature of it. It was science fiction in sound, and it had an attitude. There was a sort of, I don't know, there was something about it that just tickled my maybe slightly rebellious nature. It was pushing the boundaries of what I already understood to be normal. And I just fell massively in love with it. You know, it took me to a place that nothing else had ever taken me to. Again, you know, there was substance use going on with it, opening the mind and opening the ears, and just also the togetherness that this scene was creating. This unique sort of coming together of these strange people from all over the world in this one place where we were all bugging out the same thing. and meeting all these incredibly strange, wonderful, beautiful people. It was a combination of the place, the people, the sound, and the attitude that went with it. There was a freedom. We felt like we discovered something completely new, which I guess in a way it was.
So after collecting music and experiencing the parties in Goa, how did the Flying Rhino group come together? Like Dominic Lamb and George Barker, they were like partners in crime in the beginning, I guess. And how did you guys meet?
Well, I'd been friends. I met Dom in Goa. George and I had been friends for a long time prior, and we were organising little parties back in England. Little people parties, they were called, at the beginning of the 90s. And when I first went to Goa, I met someone called Adam Boyd, who you will know from Boyd in the Void. And unfortunately, he died on my stag night being the night before, just a week before I was going to get married. All the male friends, we all come together, and we were all down in Cornwall. And unfortunately, Adam fell off a cliff and departed this mortal coil. And he was making clothes in Goa, and he had a little label called Flying Rhino. The reason being, he's like, the rhino is one of the most powerful animals on the planet. Imagine one that can fly, and all that sort of thing. And in his memory, Flying Rhino was born. We were already talking about starting a label because we were beginning to dabble with writing our own music. I started tooling around with Matt, with Technosomy in like 92. We started making noises and fucking around. And then Slinky Wizard was beginning to happen as well when Adam was there, when it was all started, when the name was coined, Slinky Wizard, I think with Roger Ram in Youth's Butterfly Studios at the time. Posford was T-Boy, and they worked late at night when everything was done. And Youth very sweetly allowed us all to mess about. And that's where Slinky Wizard was born, and that Technosomy I was doing with Matt down in Kent. So simultaneously, we were all involved in doing this music that we'd all been influenced by in our first trips to Goa. And we came back with this hunger to develop our own sound within this, to create music that would get played on the beaches and at the parties. And that's what we were doing. And then Flying Rhino was born as a memory of Adam and as a platform for us to start releasing our own music. So yeah, unfortunately, in a way, Flying Rhino was born out of a tragedy, but that tragedy has been a lifelong legacy. He's in everything we've ever done.
The Rhino in the Sky, I think, the releases.
He's the Rhino in the Sky, yeah.
So practically we can say that the main motivation was just to release your own stuff, to have an output.
Yeah.
Why aren't you releasing like on Youth's label or Blue Room, or those weren't existing at that time?
Butterfly and Dragonfly were existing then, yeah. Tit was just beginning. All of the labels that became the mainstay, they were just beginning. Blue Room was a little later, but we were adamant about starting our own little team, And then Dave Wesson, it was actually Dave Wesson, who had a shop called Zoo up in Camden. We used to, as DJs, we used to go up there and buy our music from him, and we took him some demos of cassettes of stuff that we were doing. And he had Zoom Records, a label, and he loved what we were doing. He was like, you know what, I can run with this. And we signed a contract with him, and the contract was very unfavorable to us as artists. And we met a lovely old friend of ours, Sally Kemp Welsh, who ran the label for a few years, a label manager, Sal's. She was working in the music industry anyway, but she wanted to do her own thing. She was working for Mute, I think, at the time. She saw what we were up to. She's like, look, you guys, you've signed your lives away on a contract that's never going to do you any favors. Why don't we do something ourselves? So she basically helped us make the break for Dave Wesson. Dave Wesson, when we left him, said, you guys will be dead in 6 months. And well, he was wrong. He was wrong. It took a few more years before we split up.
That's why the first four EPs have a different catalog number. Those were the Zoom releases. Yes. The Slinky Wizard, the Kundalini, exactly. I think the Odds.
Exactly, yeah. Shaver, I think. Right. And yeah, there were 4 releases that were ZA AFR, or I can't remember exactly what they were, but they had Z in front of them, and that was Zoom. Yeah. Anyway, he said, you guys, you don't stand a chance. You're all useless. You won't survive in this industry. Anyway, we proved him wrong.
Yeah. Then how do you remember those first few formative years? The scene was basically developing as you were growing as a label, so you were right at the heart of it. How do you remember the reception of Flying Rhino and the parties at the time?
Well, the reception, I mean, the parties were one thing. The music was, the parties we were already doing. There was already a little scene going, and we were putting on parties. It was very small. But musically, because of Sal's connections within the music industry, we were able to create a very extensive promotional promo mailing list, from Sven Vath to, I mean, well, basically back in the day, it was vinyl. There was no other medium. So everything was sent to everyone. And we started getting the most incredible feedback from the music that we were releasing. And we started selling lots of copies of everything. We pressed 5,000 or 6,000 copies of the 12-inch, and bang, the whole lot would go. It was part of the techno scene. There wasn't a trance scene so much, or there certainly wasn't the category of trance music or psytrance as there is now. I guess it all got pigeonholed into techno, and then it found its own path as other labels got involved, as other labels were created. The whole Goa Trance thing started to become a kind of a category of music. Yeah.
Where does the original Flying Rhino logo come from?
It comes from a very dear friend, Darren, who was one of Adam's best friends. He drew it many, many years ago, and we took that label, that little logo, to be the logo for the label. Yeah.
And I think over the years you changed the logo. It represented the evolution of the.
Well, we had to kind of move. You can't keep doing the same thing all the time. And as it was with the creative output on all fronts, visually and sonically, we moved and we developed. We were always trying to look for new ways to essentially go to the same place. Yeah.
Your first compilation was Void in the Void, right?
Yeah.
And what do you remember about that release? What was the kind of pivotal moment in putting it together? Or
it was all about Adam. It was all about Adam. Everybody who was involved in writing the music for that, it was all with Adam. They all knew him. It was all about representing him. It's as simple as that. In memoriam to Adam Boyd. Yeah.
So it wasn't even like people already had a few tracks going on and they just submitted them and you released them, but it was more like they already had this initiative to commemorate Adam, and that's how the track started to form.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, it was a pivotal sort of signature release for us. I think from that moment on, we knew where we stood. It was the first big release after being with Zoom. And that was why it was done. It was like, let's bring him into the picture properly, and let's write music with him in mind. And that's what happened.
Right after Void in the Void, you had the first Technosomy LP, right? How do you remember the studio process or the release? What was the reception of the album?
It was a very emotional. Because, it took a while to write. Matt was on the move. He moved out of his home. I was going through separation with my first wife. It was a very emotional time, and I still wasn't as far down the production process as I'd like to have been at that stage. So I was very reliant on Matt to kind of be the helm. And it was frustrating and it was very rewarding. It was many things, but it was highly emotional, is what I can say. And there were moments of serious frustration with trying to get what I really wanted to get out of me and out of my understanding of the scene onto a finished format. There are parts of the album I love, and there are parts of the album I really struggle with. But that was my relationship with my frustration, I think, with not being able to fully do what I wanted to or fully express what I wanted to express. You know, when you write with somebody else, you compromise. You have to do. And Matt hadn't, you know, he hadn't been subjected to the music in the way that I had, and he had a slightly different approach. So, and in a way, that created something very unique. You know, it's a subject that I find quite difficult to talk about. I mean, Matt and I are still very dear friends, and you know, we will get in the studio one day soon. We started writing a new track together, and who knows what come in the future. But it came and it went. Technosophy. We did the album, and then bang, after that we kind of went our separate ways. He had his own ideas, and I had my own ideas. But we left on very amicable terms. It was just a creative differences.
We will talk a little bit about Technosomia later and the album. In terms of the label, was it different to finally release an artist album, or it has more tracks, so it will have another vinyl in it, or was there any difference?
Well, again, it was down to the fact that we were spending a lot of time in the studio. We were writing a lot of music, and we were like, look, we can put an album together. How about it? And we were just, it was an experiment. None of us knew what the reception was going to be. None of us knew how it was going to be received, whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. We didn't know. You don't know until you try it. So we had a go at it, and you know, it was fine. We sold everything, and it went really well. Yeah, and it got us gigs. You know, Matt and I started playing quite a lot around the place, from the Melkweg in Amsterdam to some massive raves in France and what have you. But it was quite tricky playing live in those days because there was no real digital format. So we used to have to put the entire recording studio into a van and drive it to wherever it was that we were going to play it, and put the whole fucking studio on stage, which created its own problems in you know, when things crashed or the computer crashed, you were left with silence. You had to start hitting the keys and bringing things back up from silence, which actually every now and again turned into some of the most magical moments that we ever performed. Mistakes create magic.
When I saw you guys 2 years ago, I think it was it was 2 years ago at Space Safari.
Yeah,
I think both of you didn't put the whole studio.
No, we definitely didn't do that. No. Since being asked to come back in this day and age, you know what I'm talking about. When we did live, it was in the 90s, where there was
I know,
no real thing. But since then, Matt's got involved with Tractor. Tractor's not really my thing, but we started fucking around with the tracks, finding weird versions of them, started layering loops and slightly different kicks underneath things. We just started trying to beef up the production that we had back in the day, basically. I mean, ZNA, there was a ZNA set that we played, when was it? It must have been 5 or 6 years ago, that goes down in my memory banks as one of the best moments that we've ever had. Playing out, it was extraordinary. Everything just worked, and we got the right flow with the music that we'd written, and it was the right time of day, and it was extraordinary. It was amazing. That put my faith back in the fact that, you know, there is life in the retro. Because you got to remember that, as I said earlier, it was a very emotional time. We were very young. We were experimenting. Production wasn't really something that we were worried about. It was more getting the noise and the idea that was in our head and heart out. Since then, obviously, you start to fine tune your output and the sonic quality of what it is that you're doing. So when you're playing music that was written 25, 30 years ago, today, in amongst music that I'm involved in playing sort of more modern stuff, it can be quite painful for me, you know?
I talked with some artists who said similar things, and it's really strange to me because if you listen to all the rock music records from the 60s and the 70s, which are really, really nice, they sound shit to today's standards, but they are awesome and people are still listening to it. And I feel the same way with Goa Trance from the 90s, that even though the production is not in par with today's standard, but who cares? The music,
the idea and the energy and the spontaneity of it is still there. No, I totally agree.
So how did you guys operate as a label? How should we imagine a day in the life of Flying Rhino?
A day in the life.
Especially before internet.
All communication was done on the phone and via fax. We were sending everything out with a fax machine. And it was, and this runs to the post office to send promos out to people to send. Yeah, I mean, it was very, very analog, shall we say, back in the day. Very analog. It was time consuming. We did everything by hand. All the labels were done by hand. Everything was done by hand, and lists, endless lists. And yeah, it was a very different animal to what it is today. Very different animal.
Yeah. If some of our listeners would compare to today's label sales, you mentioned like 5,000 copies of a vinyl. These days, if you sell 500 of a CD or a vinyl, that's a huge hit in this scene. How did the sales of Goa Records compare in that day to like other genres of the underground scene or other labels? How did you guys see yourself financially? Was it a good business model?
I don't think it was a particularly good business model, as far as we didn't really pay ourselves. We paid the people who we employed, but as partners, we didn't really pay ourselves at all. Once we were established and we built the recording studio, and we had the Belsize Park set up where we had the recording studio, had Gus living there, we had Annie, and we had Sal's as employed, and the manufacturing, we had to generate a lot of money. But as regards sales in relation to the rest of the world, we were a fraction of what was going on. It's all relative. We were selling 5,000 to 10,000 copies of CDs and stuff, but more commercially viable music was selling 20, 30, 40 upwards. So it was all relative. We were a niche scene then, even though the figures sound large compared to today. But then today we've got streaming. It's a completely different format. This was all about tangible hardware in your hand. And obviously with Napster, things started to change. And I think the day when we knew the writing was on the wall was in the office. I received, because I was in charge of A&R for the label, I received a box in the post, a little cardboard box with my name on it, very nicely presented. And when I opened it up, it was this little electronic, the first MP3 player, and it was associated with Napster. And I got it out of the box and I looked at the thing, and I was just like, I looked at George and he looked at me and he's like, what the fuck's that? And I said, dude, this is the end. This is us as a record label. Yes, we can be a music label, but as a record label, this is it. It's a downhill struggle from here on in. And that was when the writing was on the wall. We're like, shit, we're moving into the digital domain. And, we are where we are now on the back of Napster and MP3s.
Was the label democratic, or everybody had its own responsibility? You said you were running A&R.
Yeah. We had Sal's doing the label management. We had Annie doing the office work, doing accounting, and she kind of became a label manager when Sal's walked away. It was, nothing was put out without us all agreeing on it. It was a very democratic process. We all got excited about stuff. Of course, we didn't agree on everything, but nothing was released without us all agreeing that, yeah, this is worthy. And we'd always think about Adam. Would Adam like this? Yes, he would. Right, come on, let's get on with it. Yeah. He was pretty much in every decision we made.
What were the biggest challenges?
I hate to say it, but cash flow. We'd take a gamble every time we manufactured, a release. Depending on the feedback we got given, all the reviews or whatever it was in the magazines, we'd have to sort of go, right, how many should we make of this? 3,000, 5,000, whatever it might be, 1,500, whatever. This is a bit more left of center. Let's do 1,000 of this, it was always a gamble. And as a result, it was all about cash flow, because the whole process of mastering the track, putting it onto vinyl, sending out the promos, getting feedback from the promos, DJs going, by the way, the needle jumps out because the bass, or whatever it was. We had to send tracks back to get put onto vinyl because it wasn't done properly. It was a massive process, and then we'd have to send it off to be manufactured. which was an expense. Then that would go to then once we had them manufactured, we'd have to send them off to the distributors. And then we rely on the distributors paying us for what we've sent them on time so that we can then send the money off to manufacture more. And there's this cycle. And if once that cycle got broken, if a distributor didn't pay us, then we couldn't spend the money on manufacturing. And then our overheads, the rent, everything else would catch up. And then we were suddenly out of our debt, which is essentially what happened at the end. I'm not going to name names, but there was a distributor who I know fucked a lot of record labels back in the day. They owed us, let's say, 40,000, 50,000 euros, and we owed our manufacturers the same amount. And then our manufacturer said, look, this has been going on too long. Until you pay us, we will not manufacture anymore. And that was it. That was it. The cycle was broken, and we went into debt, and it was game over. We had to liquidate. So yeah, the biggest battle, like anything these days, it was cash flow, generating enough to pay for what comes next.
It was still when the label was in its prime, you released a lot of very successful compilations, like cornerstones of the Goa style, basically the first flight, second flight, so the flight series, and there was the Re-Evolution, the white and black rhinos, so the different color rhinos, Retrodelica. So there were a couple of different series. Did you intend to have these running for like several editions? What was the idea behind these compilation series?
Well, the Retrodelica series obviously were separate. In a way, they were separate to what we did as a label creatively, because most of the output was music that hadn't been released yet. The Retrodelica series, which to me still are some of the most timeless things I think we've ever released, was music that we were playing as DJs outside of our own label that was turning us on and was smashing the arse out the dance floor. That was kind of self-indulgent. We were like, look, we've got to put some of this music out. Some of it was, it was only ever on vinyl. It was very underground, and we just wanted to kind of present it to the world on CDs, a compilation, because we could. The Flight series, that was generally new music that we were involved in, or that we found through friends and people that were sending us demos and what have you. And that was just a very simple. The ideology behind that was anything to do with flight. When you're flying, Maelstrom, all these things were to do with flying. Black Rhino, White Rhino, obviously they're endangered species, and those two compilations were only ever going to be those two compilations. But we never really thought that far ahead. We were very in the moment while this was going on. We didn't have a grand plan. Maybe we should have. None of us had a degree. None of us had been to business school. We were very self-indulgent, and we were living day to day, very much so. Much to the what's the word? Much to the frustration of the slightly more sensible business-minded characters we had working with us, like Sal's and at some point Cass and Lucas.
Yeah, because even back in the day, some labels would come up with a logo or a design for a compilation, and then they would start churning out like 6, 7, 12 editions of the same compilation, same name, maybe a different cover, but the concept would stay the same. But it seems that you guys favored the spontaneity of these ideas. Right?
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, we kept the sort of the series when we were doing the EPs and the vinyl, the 12 inches, obviously. That was quite color coordinated. We'd have a period of time where there would be a few releases with the same design, different colors or different color stickers. That was for continuity because those were being released a lot more regularly than the compilations. The compilations were kind of a special edition of something. Don't really know what, but it was a celebration of the music as it was. So every cover. We worked with Siberia, who Danny and Marcus, who did our artwork for years. Their office was right beside us, and we were all in it together. So I'd go around, they'd go, right, I've got an idea. This is the title. and we'd all bug out on trying to come up with a cover concept for the word that we were using as the title of the compilation. So it was a very spontaneous, creative process that we all went through, and then we go, wow, look, we've done it, we've got it. This is there it is. There's a visual representation of this album, or this compilation rather, and it kind of talks about, it sort of represents the sound of that compilation.
Can you recall any of these compilations or these releases in general that was like a really huge success, even financially? Or was there any that was sort of a disappointment? You were expecting it to sell well and then it turned out to be a flop?
Slipstream was a pivotal moment, I think, because we pushed the envelope of what constituted psytrance. And we gained followers and we lost followers. But as a listening experience, it got some amazing feedback and people absolutely loved it. Night Vision, I mean, each of them had their own merit. None of them disappointed on the figures side. And we were all very excited. And none of them were released with anything less than massive excitement from all of them.
Slipstream starts with Klein Aber Doktor, I think, right? From Atmos. Yeah. How can you be wrong with that?
Well, that's what's so funny. Klein Aber Doktor was a track that Thomas sent to pretty much every single record label that was around at that time. Thomas sent the cassette to everyone, and I'd listened to it and I'd sort of gone, yeah, that's nice. But it was only when I was in my car driving back from a party, still, very receptive to sounds, shall we say. And I was driving home and I put the cassette on and it just jumped out at me. I was like, holy shit, this is beautiful. And it was different. And it hit a particular moment. It hit a particular emotion at a time when it felt that things were getting a little tired. It sounded fresh, even though it was quite soft in comparison to a lot of other things being released at the time. And I jumped on it. I was like, bloody hell. So anyway, we released it. And then Thomas, apparently, he's told me since, he said, Jim, you know what? He said, I got so many fucking phone calls from all the other labels that I'd sent it to going, why the fuck didn't you send me that? Why did you give that to Flying Rhino? It's like, because they're the only guys who responded. You all received it. And that was the beginning of my relationship with the wonderful Thomas. Yeah.
How did you collect tracks back in the day for those compilations that you created?
A lot of demos, people sending music in, a lot of friends that we knew who were writing music. It was all connection. It was all. There was very few tracks on some of the compilations that were just cold from people that we didn't know. There was generally some thread between us and the artist that allowed them to come to the office and go, look, guys, we're here. Can we play you this? And they put the track on. We go, oh, wow. It was very warm. The connection was there before the music was released. Whereas today, everything's done digitally and you send it off and you wait for a response. And, most of the music that we released was all done through actually meeting one another and getting excited together.
And which is your favorite compilation that you created? Which are you the most proud of?
Oh, blimey. It's difficult because from one day to the next, I would give you a different answer depending on my mood. But I think probably Slipstream, just because it was a pivotal moment within what we were doing, emotionally and creatively. It broke the dam of we were a bit stuck, and it broke the dam and allowed us to spread our wings a little further with what we were happy to release. And we were like, actually, you know what? This works. It was an experiment. Slipstream was a bit of an experiment. Slides track that was on there. It was a very different approach to psychedelic music. And when he didn't want to play it to us, because he was sort of embarrassed about, oh my God, it's a bit housey, or it's, you know, there was a lot of experimentation with that album. Me and Gus doing Stupid Fidget, Mudless. You know, everybody was at Glastonbury that weekend, and we were in the studio. Mudless was called Mudless because they were at Glastonbury, and they were waist high in mud, and we were in the studio Mudless, just messing about with 101 and a 909, and Mudless was born. You know, there are tracks on there that was an experiment away from the kind of formula that was beginning to emerge within Psytrance.
So both as a label and yourself as a producer, but also as a DJ, you took part in the evolution of Psytrance. So from Goa Trance, we got into the minimalistic, hypnotic, progressive trance, and then to the less melodic, more psychedelic trance. And I also think that Flying Rhino was the leader in terms of the changes. And I guess with Slipstream, you're the first one who actually released this type of music. So what was it like to experience this from the inside? How do you remember these pivotal changes?
Nervousness. We were a little nervous because, you know, we had a diehard following, and, you know, they loved what we were beginning to get bored of. We got bored very quickly. Well, I personally get bored very quickly of I need to hear something a little new that changes. That, oh my God, what's going on there? This is interesting. And as it goes back to my acid house days, are not just about trance. I've been so turned on by so many genres within the dance scene, from house music to techno to it does, and a BPM as well. I'm not bothered about BPM. I like things when they're slowed down because it gives me the chance to catch up. And also, early Goa trance wasn't fast. All the new beat stuff, early Goa, proto Goa stuff. We listen to it now, you know, it's in the 130s, if some of it even slower. And yes, when they were mixing off DAT and off cassette, which is how it was done originally, you had to play the track in its without pitch control DAT machine or a pitch control cassette machine, which weren't that common. You had to play the tracks as they were written. So, you know, from one track to another, which is where Mike McGuire was. So he kept that thing alive because he refused to just have a mix, had one track blending into another on the BPM wise. I was involved in doing acid house, and it was all about mixing with vinyl, getting one track to mix with the other and creating something different with the two tracks mixing together. So I had one foot in acid house and house music, and then another foot in the whole trance and psytrance and this whole sort of the pace of things. And yeah, when we did Slipstream, we took a deep breath and we're like, how's this gonna go? We weren't sure, and it went really well. We got a lot of criticism, as I said, from some people, but it also opened up a whole nother market. People were like, oh my God, this, you know, it moved into progressive house. There were people in the scene, Digweed and Sasha and whoever else, Nick Warren, who started going, wow, this is amazing. And it was accessible to them, and it made trance accessible to a different kind of movement.
Yeah, and you mentioned Atmos and Slide also on the Slipstream compilation. Was there any other track, or do you remember any definitive moment where you realized that the sound is really changing? Something new came along that captivated you, not just as a label owner, but as a producer, and you were like, now this is a new sound. Do you remember anything other than like the Atmos track or some other?
I was just trying to remember what was on the Blinking album. Have you got it in front of you? What was on that? Can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, so there's the obviously yours track, Stupid Fidget was there, the Mudless, Cophless Resonator.
Oh, Cophless Resonator. Oh, yes. Again, you know, that was when you listen to it, that was, to me, the beginnings of what Songkite and this whole sort of slightly fast, progressive techno. You know, we moved into the techno realm with this, and yeah, it was. Give me the other tracks as well. There was Cophless Resonator.
There's Venom, Try It.
Oh yes. That was the French boys, young kids. This was new. These were new artists. Yeah.
Yeah, Dragon, Freak the Greek.
Yeah.
There was Gus Steele with his Boss project.
Yeah.
Something's Always Out There.
Yeah.
Blue Planet Corporation, Micromega.
Micromega. Yeah.
Yeah. And OJ Project.
Oh, it's yeah, Massimo Devona, who was a massive influence on me. And we used to play his vinyls back in the day. And I mean, he was one of the most extraordinary artists I ever had to sort of do business with. Extraordinary character, genius in his own way. Yeah, we were being slightly self-indulgent, but we've been playing this music to dance floors. The proof had been in, there was no denying how powerful this music was in the way that people were responding to it when it was played at the right time. And it was that made us feel confident that we had something that, yes, it was different, but at the same time, it carried weight and it had a reaction on the dance floor. It was a different kind of reaction, but it was a very strong emotional reaction nevertheless. And at the end of the day, it was the dance floor is where all the homework's done. It's simple as that. Without that feedback, you're stabbing in the dark.
But nowadays, it's pretty common that progressive kind of music, these BPMs and this sound is played during the daytime at festivals. Was it like that back then? Back in the day, was it obvious that it has to fit in the daytime, or
there was you got to remember that the festival scene as it's become now, back then, we'd do parties that went on for 24 hours. This sort of 4, 5, 6 day events that are happening now and have been happening for the last little while, they weren't that common then. So you had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you'd have a warm up, and then you'd have the nighttime, and then you'd have the morning and the sunrise. And a lot of the music latterly that we did was to do with the sunrise element. And that was generally when, as a DJ, that was my preferred time to play. We had Dom was fucking sensational in the middle of the night. He'd always get this dark, incredible power through the nighttime that was completely correct for that time of day. If you were to put him at 9 o'clock in the morning, it would be That's how we thought about it then. So yeah, when you'd have the power and the sort of the hard work of the nighttime, and then when the sun came up, you'd soften it and move into a slightly more melodic, maybe slightly slower pace of music that allowed people to stop and open up and look around and join together with the light and with the sunshine. Yeah, so yeah, I think the progressive, as it's called, has its time in the morning and in the daytime. That's from my perspective. I'm 56 years old. I've been doing this a long time. That's not to say that what I think and say is the way it should be or the way that it is these days, because I think times have changed. What people want and how people's energy has changed, and dance floor energy has changed. So I have my habits and what I'm comfortable with, but it's definitely changed. It's definitely shifted. But for me, if it was up to me and I was doing a lineup, and I'd have the faster, more intense music through the dark hours, and then have it warming up and slowing down a bit for sunrise in the daytime.
I think Flying Rhino was one of the leaders of this movement in terms of quality. So as much as I love Goa Trance, I really, really enjoy early progressive music. And Flying Rhino released quality on both ends of this sound spectrum, so to say. While other labels tend to release not so good tracks. I wanted to say crap, but well. So you had a really nice filter. So what was your secret to keep the quality high?
I think it goes back to the fact that three of us, George, Dom, and myself, before anything else, we were DJs. Simple as that. And we were exposing ourselves to, because when we did parties, we weren't just playing our own music, we were buying vinyl all the time. We were rushing off to the record shops every week to find what we could find these weird bits of vinyl that weren't necessarily psytrance. I remember when I first played Underworld, Rez, Cowgirl at a party, I put it on the turntable about 8 times before I had the courage to play it. But when I did play it, the fucking place went absolutely ballistic. But that's not psytrance. That's not psychedelic music. But played at the right time in the right environment, it fully is. So I think we were constantly exposing ourselves to so many variations of music within the dance world. We weren't scared to push the envelope of what constituted psychedelic music, you know, and we were exposing ourselves to some of the, you know, some of the most sort of, some of the biggest producers in the world, which gave us a benchmark with which to gauge what it was that we were doing personally. You know, we had the standards were set by others.
Do you still have your collection?
Oh my God, they're dotted around all over the place. I have not got them in one place because I've been so nomadic through my life that I've left boxes of records and collections of records all over the world, literally all over the world. One day, I will try and collate them and pick them all up from one place when I know that I'm going to be able to set my decks up, start going through them all, and collate them and put them in one place. It'll be something I do when I'm a bit older, I think. But yes, I've got the most ridiculous collection of music on vinyl. I haven't seen it for years.
Yeah, it was an incredible evolutionary phase of the scene. You mentioned like early 90s, the Proto-Goa kind of phase, then like early Twisted, like by Hallucinogen and other early releases. And in the span of like 5 years, we got to Atmos and Head Cleaner and the progressive sound. And nowadays, if you compare this pace of style change, it has been a little slower. Like if you look at the last 10 or 15 years, I think there wasn't that much of a change in terms of sound in psytrance. Of course, we have like new subgenres and things, and the production quality may be improved, but melodically, structurally, do you still see the innovation, or do you really agree that this span of 5 or maybe 10 years in the 90s was really a fast evolution of the music?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think because back then, you know, we weren't working in quite the same way we are now with plugins. There was a lot of hardware involved. And when you've got hardware involved, it's expensive. You have to buy one synth, and you can only use that one synth for that one track. You can't use the same, like with today's production, you can have the same synth 60 times. And every analog synth has a character. So you had to do more with less, if that makes any sense. Because you didn't have endless channels that you could open. You had to use very little to get as big a sound as you could from what you were using. So melody was very important to then. Today, it seems to be, I don't know, I wouldn't say lost, but there's so much generic software that everybody's using. So it's very difficult to get that signature sound that, you know, back in the day, we were all using the same, or a lot of us were using the same synths and the same, because they were affordable. But they all had a character, and you could hear Total Eclipse, you could hear Extreme, you could hear Slinky Wizard, you could hear whoever they were. They had a sound, and you would go, oh my God, there's a new Total Eclipse track, without even knowing it was a Total Eclipse track, just because of the way they came through with the equipment that they had at their fingertips. Today, things are shared, ideas are shared, YouTube, you can learn how to do all the so there's this kind of formula that hadn't been created, I don't think, back then. And arrangements and tutorials and all this sort of thing. It's definitely changed. And to be honest, that's why I kind of, for a few years, I completely bowed out of trance. When I first came to Brazil, after Flying Rhino went bust, I completely moved away from it. I was writing progressive house. I was still doing trippy music, but I completely rejected, emotionally and mentally, completely rejected the trance scene because I was fucking bored. It all sounded the same, and I was like, where I'm not being surprised. I go to the dance floor. I love dancing. That's where I get it all from. And I kept finding myself going, fuck, this is really boring. I'm bored. I'm not being excited by it. And that really upset me. So I was like, right, rather than get upset by it, just walk away and wait for something to shift, and you get excited by it again. It took a while for that moment to happen, but it did, and I'm excited, and I'm back in it again because kind of there's room for what I appreciate to be put back into it.
Regarding the formula that you mentioned, why do you think that artists are afraid to experiment? That's something I don't understand.
I don't know, to be honest. I think possibly because the word trance has taken on a slightly new meaning. The continuity of same kick and bass and the I don't really understand it, but from sort of doing my own research with people who are in this, it is about going from A to B over 6 hours, and you're like, what just happened? I don't even know how I got there. But it's a constant, it's a seam of music that doesn't move that left or right. It's a journey with one channel, and people don't like to throw curveballs into it in quite the same way that we used to, because you can create this sound. There are artists who are creating sound that merges into one another perfectly to the point where you don't know where one begins and another ends. And I think it's this it's another way of doing it. I don't think it's necessarily right or wrong. I just think it's another way of doing it. The finesse and the detail that you can now create, it's a whole nother animal. Whereas back in the day, you had to make, as a DJ, you had to make do with what you had. Track from these guys, track from those guys. You had to do your best to make them fit together. But it was very different sound. And so it could go left or right. Whereas now it's such a highly tuned machine that's creating this. I don't know, it's a behemoth. And there are times when I love it, and there are times when I'm running for cover. I can't cope. So yeah, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it.
Flying Rhino also had a sister label, the Flying Rhino Freestyle,
Yes.
and it has one CD that I really, really love, the Caribbean Eclipse, which is such a great atmosphere and awesome selection of tracks. So why did you create this sister label?
Because we loved down-tempo music. It's as simple as that. Simple as that. And we could. We had the ability to. We had the art department. We had production. We were able to burn CDs. CDs changed everything. We could do compilations in a way that doing it on vinyl was a very different thing. You could do it cheaper. You could do it quicker, and without taking such a gamble. And yeah, we realized that we spent a lot of our time listening to down tempo music, and we thought, why not? Let's have a go. And the whole Eclipse series was because we were involved in all of the eclipses.
So which track or album would you recommend from Flying Rhino Freestyle for someone who is not familiar with it?
Oh, blimey. Sofa's amazing. It's sort of left field. I think the Caribbean Eclipse is a really good starting point. It's very accessible. And then, I did Time compilation, and my whole CD1 is all down-tempo music, where we're fusing some of the artists from Fly Rhino who are writing down-tempo music. The sister label and Fly Rhino merged very beautifully together. George latterly took on doing the freestyle thing himself, and Wabi Sabi was an amazing album. Friends of mine have given birth to their children with that on in the background. And I still listen to it now, and I really want to just. It's amazing. I don't know if it's resonated with you, Wabi, but it's an incredible album. Yeah, Wabi or Caribbean Eclipse, probably. Yeah, as starting points.
Flying Rhino went under when actually? How did it end?
Well, it ended, as I said, when we could no longer pay our bills because we were owed money and we owed money, and our manufacturers eventually said, "Guys, we're not manufacturing anything more for you until you pay your bill." We couldn't pay the bill. We were owed money. We went into liquidation. And literally, it happened in weeks. We were done. We were left with a room and a fax machine. That was it. They took everything. Everything. we went into liquidation. And that was it was a very painful moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that it was like losing your child basically, or something.
It was a bit, but as I said, we'd seen the writing had been on the wall for a while. We knew the inevitable was coming. And, like all these things, cycles are part of life. And we had 7 good years. And all good things have to come to an end. We all started going in different directions, emotionally, musically. We were all beginning to tread different paths.
So what's George and Dominic been up to these days? Do you know?
Well, George, I'm still very much in touch with. Dominic, I haven't seen for a while. He moved to Thailand. He was living in Ibiza for a few years. He was doing his own thing over there. George has very much got involved with medicine and medicine music. He runs a festival now in the UK called Medicine Festival. He's taught himself how to play the guitar beautifully, and he's on a different journey, but at the same time, a very similar journey.
Looking back upon your catalog, which is your favorite EP, album, and compilation?
Oh, my word. I'd have to go through it all because there are so many. And again, there are times of the day where I'd be like, it's this, and then the next day I'd be, no, it's that. I don't think there's nothing that I'm not very proud of that we did. Ones that really stick out. Really chuffed with the picture disc that we did, the Summer Appetizer, with Grant Collins. Him and I did a 4D track, and he did an accession track on there, I think. Artist albums. Planet Ben Silver was a pretty seminal moment, just for this very different, stripped back, minimal, highly polished, very Germanic approach to music. And it was one of those albums that at home it didn't sound much, but when you played the tracks out individually loud, oh my god, extraordinary. The Retrodelica compilations I still listen to, given half a chance on my own here at home now, just because of the nostalgia. And yeah, I'd say, and Slipstream, which just, as I said earlier, it's as a kind of benchmark to a lot of things that came later. And it sounds really nice back to back. And actually, Something for the Weekend, I love. That stood the test of time amazingly.
And as a DJ, what were the tracks that made the biggest impression on dance floors from Flying catalog that you played?
Or that you still play these days from the old back catalog, maybe?
Stuff that I still play, Bamboo Forest still sounds phenomenal. Blue Planet, I still play his music. Think what else? There's still so much in the catalogue that I play that when it's played in context, absolutely rocks. I mean, when we did the Azora Pampuri stage, whenever it was, 2 years ago, I mean, we did 13 hours, 14 hours, all of us playing within each other. So there was no stop-start. There was no right, next. We just seamlessly did what we've always done, which is you play, we played, bang, bang, bang. You don't know when one ends and the other one finishes. One ends and the other one begins. And we were all playing the music that we loved from back then. I'm just trying to think crikey. God's Eye on Goa, the old extremes, obviously. I mean, absolutely seminal. Some of the 4D stuff still sounds good that I played out. Oh my God, you know what? This is something I have to get back to you on. This is good homework because I'd like to really nail that. Slide stuff still sounds phenomenal. Moody, and it's still got a very tight production on it even now. The Darshan music is extraordinary, and it stands the test of time as well. Yeah, there's so much of it. Some of the early Bumbling Loons I'm very happy with. It's still, when we do sort of more retro Bumbling Loon sets, we play some of the old stuff, and it still sounds amazing. Yeah, and the Slinky Wizard as well. Some of the early Slinky stuff. It's timeless.
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure. Some of these tracks were put out. I think most of the catalog was put out in the early 2000s in an MP3 download, kind of low quality back in the
I had
day.
nothing to do with any of that.
Really?
Gus started getting a bit carried away. People started, I don't know, there was some cheeky maneuvers. But to be honest, I wasn't emotionally attached enough to get in the way of allowing these things to happen. It's part of the process in this day and age. I'm not precious. The music is reverted to the artist. It's up to them. And I mean, yes, it would be nice if it was a bit more controlled and people were releasing proper, not MP3s anyway, full resolution, possibly remastered, versions of some of the old stuff. But yeah, I wasn't really involved in any of that, to be honest.
So these days, what's standing in the way of releasing the old Flying Rhino catalog, maybe digitally remastered, maybe put it on Bandcamp for people to access this music in a good quality?
Well, basically, we'd have to create different compilations because a lot of the music has reverted to the artist. So the actual copyright and publishing rights for me to be able to release, I have to go through the whole process again to get the tracks back from the artists. A lot of the artists don't want that music to be released again. That was a moment in time, which I completely understand, and I feel similarly that was then. And there are people who've, should we say, the guardians of Goa Trance are doing a good job, I think. And as I said, to re-release any of those compilations in the form that they were then, again, I mean, without being rude to the artists, I couldn't do it because there's too much legal ramifications of it. I don't own the music, or the label Flying Rhino doesn't own the music. Yep. Simple as that.
Yeah, we just miss it that we cannot listen to. I mean, I have a lot of the old Flying Rhino vinyls, but I need to grab it somehow digitally if I want to listen to it. And still some of it, there are a lot of cracks and pops, so it's not best quality.
But that's part of the joy of it.
Yeah.
When I hear cracks and pops, I know I'm listening to it in this original form. Yeah. And I wish there were more people playing vinyl now that the retro thing is as popular as it is. There's a lot of this music that hasn't been digitized and is only available on vinyl. And it sounds fucking fat when you hear it out loud on vinyl. If the decks are engineered properly, good needles, earthed, decks not jumping about. People put the decks on a wooden stage. It's a disaster. The decks have to go straight into the ground, through the stage and into the ground, so there's no needle movement. And I think Sid Shanty played last year at ZNA. He played with vinyl, and the whole system breathes in a different way with vinyl. It's a different animal. It's a different sound.
So you reactivated the label for short periods.
Yeah.
For a couple of releases, Darshan. Yeah. There was also the Extreme remixes compilation, I think. So, but I think there are no releases lately. No. So what's up?
Basically, I think Fly Rhino was a sum of all the parts. It was me and George Adam and us, and we were doing something. And emotionally, Adam, and just the whole, it was a moment in time. And the idea of resurrecting it with me and Grant it felt like a good idea at the time, but it just felt uncomfortable. It didn't feel right. And we're writing music. I don't want to run a record label anymore. It's not a record label anyway. I don't want to run a label anymore. I've done that bit. I'd rather spend my time producing new projects, moving forwards, and let that be what it was without letting it be tainted in any way, really, if that makes any sense. It's emotional. Sure. It's as simple as that. It's an emotional decision. And everything, time changes, things move, scenes change. Yeah. It just felt like we were trying to run uphill rather than on the flat. And it lost momentum. It needed more than just me and Grant. It needed the emotion and the passion of the group of people that we were to do it. So I'm happy to now let other people do that, and I'll just focus on doing my music with Dickie and doing my music with Grant and releasing it on those who are happy to release it, to be honest, and get lost in the production process, which is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about Napster and how digital technology changed the landscape. And nowadays, everything is about digital releases. Physical formats are getting a lot rarer. Like some labels are still releasing CDs and vinyls. Vinyls actually having a bit of a comeback, but it's more digital still, especially in the psytrance scene.
Yeah.
So how do you see the advantage and disadvantages of both digital and physical formats? As a label owner, as a DJ, how do you compare the two?
All I can say is that the ability to have, I don't know, terabytes of music at my fingertips in a tiny little bag, and be able to cross genre. I can play 25 hours of music over a weekend and play 6 different sets, all with different styles of music, but not have to carry 30 kilos of vinyl with me, is a massive start. But yeah, I just love the simplicity or the ease, because also technology has caught up, being able to play with memory stick now with these incredible pioneer machines that we have to be able to present the music. The quality is extraordinary. I miss playing with my vinyl, but as I said, progress, things move, things change. What you can do now with these CDJs or with these digital players is amazing creatively, and sonically it's a whole new realm. And I'm very happy being able to take all the music that I've got with me to go to an event and know that I've got an entire palette to choose from. Whereas before, I'd have 2 record bags, and then you'd pull one out and you'd be like, oh, I know what's shit, I left it behind. Because you made room in your record bag. You've got 3 new tracks. You put those in and you take 3 others out. And then when you want to reach for that one piece of vinyl, you haven't got it with you. So the ability to have absolutely everything at your fingertips is a massive bonus. Laptops, I'm not cool with. I find the whole playing off a laptop, particularly these days, I don't really understand why people do it, because the CDJs are so intuitive and it's hands-on again in the same way that vinyl was. You're focusing on a left and a right, and you're engaging with the audience. You're not staring at the screen, it looks like you're checking your emails. The whole, I mean, I tried it for a bit. I did Ableton. I was messing about with the controller but I think I couldn't cope with it after a while, because people were like, James, I miss seeing you engaging with us. You're bent over looking at a screen. And I'm like, yes, I know, because I've watched other people do it and I have the same feeling. So I think the new format with this, well, not new format, but the digital format that we have now to be able to play with is phenomenal.
Do you think it influences your track selections when you're preparing for a set? Like you mentioned, you could leave a precious vinyl at home and then you just realize at the party that you left it, but then you would come up with a different combination on the spot, right?
Yeah, and those magic moments, those sort of mistakes, as I said earlier, from mistakes come magic moments where you compromise and you do something you wouldn't normally do. Yes, I think in this day and age, people are very, because we're breaking it down to keys and BPMs, and so whereas before you didn't have that, you had no idea what BPM you were at when you were playing vinyl. You had a rough idea, but it's all become so specific and exact BPMs and keys. So yes, sometimes spontaneity can be lost for perfection. Getting absolutely the right track works for that. But I'm not using Record Box. I did for a bit. I still look at folders with tracks in, and I don't know what I'm going to play until I'm playing. So I still have that spontaneous ability, but I've got more at my fingertips.
So how do you decide which is the next track you play?
It's a moment. It's when you're playing something. Oh, I know what's going to come next. That's how it's always resonated with me from when I first started. I never knew what was coming next. People say, well, as long as you got your first track lined up and your last track lined up, you're fine. Yeah, until I stand on the stage sometimes, I have no idea what I'm even going to play as my first track as a DJ, which means I still get extremely nervous doing what I do because I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know I haven't made a plan. Some people might say that's foolish. With the ability nowadays to program everything, that's foolish, and you control the energy and control. But I don't think you can control the energy. What works 1 and 2 one day doesn't necessarily work as 1 and 2 the next day. The people and the place and the energy and the situation mean that doing a repeat performance can lose. It doesn't have the same impact. Yes, I'll have favorite tracks that I will go to that I know I'm going to play because I love them, and I'll have a palette from which I'm going to choose from. But I have no idea in what order or whether they get played, or I've tried to do, because it's been such a massive platform or a huge gig, and I'm like, right, I'm gonna pre-plan what I'm going to do so I make no mistakes and I get it absolutely right. And I get up there and I start with what I've said I'm going to start with. I'm 2 tracks in, I'm like, fuck this. This isn't going to work. What I want to do next is not that. I want to do that. It's all about the time and space, spontaneity.
It's like a journey from A to B, but it's ironic that, as you also said, these days the scene is a little bit afraid of experimentation. They are a little bit afraid of breaking that kind of vibe or momentum that they're defining as the trance experience. But at the same time, DJs are boxed into 1.5 hour sets.
Yes.
Whereas back in the day, you would carry those 30 kilos of vinyl, but you would play like 3 hours minimum, right?
Yeah. I mean, I played 18 hours with 2 bags of vinyl. That's the longest set I've ever played. And I only played 1 track twice. The rest was all stuff I'd always dismissed as being, oh, it's a little B-side. It's not very good. And I discovered loads of new music on the back of it, which goes back to the point you said, does it not mean that you lose the ability to discover new moments of magic? Yes, it does. Yes, an hour and a half, there's not enough time to maybe take a risk and move left of center, do something, push the audience. Because at the end of the day, the audience are on our side, and they're going to run with us, whatever we do, unless obviously you stick up 2 fingers and make them try and eat something they're not on their menu.
Mm.
The trance world has got a big palette that you've got to choose from. So you can actually go out on a limb, but people are scared of going out on a limb and not having enough time to go back to the point where, yes, you might lose a few people, but then you've got to bring them all back together for that sine wave, that oscillation of energy. It does get lost in this hour and a half or hour long sets where people just play 12 or 15 tracks, and then they're scared of moving out of the box. And I think, as you said, a lot of experimentation and possibility has been erased because of that. How many DJs can you have on a lineup? When we did parties, we had to have 4 DJs, no timings. And if somebody was playing really well, you leave them. Let them carry on. They're fucking on fire tonight. Right, let them play. He's not on fire. Bang, look, dude, you're struggling. Should we? And we'd all be in agreement. Sometimes people are doing really well. If they're doing really well, fucking leave them. Let them play their magic. Because that's, at the end of the day, give the audience the best that it can get.
Overall, with Flying Rhino, you were in the middle of the scene and you actively influenced it. So if you look back on it right now, what comes to your mind? How do you think about it from 20, 30 years after?
I think that we were very, very lucky to be riding this wave that came from such a little seed of self-indulgent joy. Really. But that self-indulgent joy was also the joy that we were feeling was we were excited to be able to give that back. to experience what we were getting excited about in the studio or buying records or whatever, going, oh my God, imagine how this is going to go down when we play it on a big rig to an audience. That excitement, I mean, it still excites me today, but I think the naivety and the spontaneity and the good fortune that we had at that time to be doing what we did when we did it, that magic is what will sit with me forever, and it feeds me to this day. There was an innocence and a naivety with it that obviously today the rules have changed, everything's changed. There are rules of engagement that back then there was a freedom that, you know, we were making up the rules as we went along, or the rules were being made up as we went along. Rules with the police, rules with production, rules with everything. It was all the rules are being written then, and now there's sort of, it's been compartmentalized. These are the rules, and you have to adhere to them, which is you know, good in some ways because it allows it to happen, but at the same time, that sort of innocence has been slightly lost, I think. So yeah, that'd be the things, just that magic of just watching something turn from a seed into a flower without really knowing how it happened. Just that we happened to be there, feeding it.
And that was the first part of our interview with James Monro. In the second part, we will discuss James's own musical output in more detail, including his solo work and his collaborations as Technosomy, Bumbling Loons, 4D, and many more. Stay tuned.
Thanks for listening, people. If you enjoyed the podcast, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe. If you have any ideas, questions, leave a comment or message us on Facebook.